Okay, good morning. We still have a few people who are dropping in. It's exactly 8:30, so 8:30 UK time, I should point out. So we'll just sort of contemplate amongst yourselves for just a further 60 seconds, and we'll just allow a minute for people who may be a little late wanting to join us, and then we'll get underway. There's an eerie silence, isn't there, after the music?
Yeah.
So just a little bit of a preamble. On the call here, you can obviously see myself, I hope. Sonja, who's calling in from the mountains of North Wales this morning. And most importantly of all, Lee Rothenbauer, who's calling in from a place called Frome in Somerset, which is about half an hour, about 30 minutes, 20 miles or so from the city of Bristol, where I'm calling from. So I think what we'll do is, since everybody else has been on time here, we'll start. And Sonja, over to you from the Welsh mountains.
From the Welsh Mountains, indeed, the life of the traveling consultant. Great to see you all again, and also hopefully some new faces. So my name is Sonja Allen of Allen & Jones Consulting Partners. I'm here with Kevin Eyre, who most of you might know, the founder and MD of Soundwave. And of course, we have Lee, and I practiced saying his name, so hopefully I'm going to get it right, Rothenbauer. Yeah, yay! as our expert on this session. This is, of course, the second of 3 in our series of respect events. While we introduced you in the last session to what we call the fundamentals of respect and the model on institutionalizing respect, today we're going to take the sort of human angle, the psychological angle, and talk about interacting with respect. And then on the 5th of May, after a small break, we're going to take the organizational angle and focus on the policies around respect. So if you don't remember our little model, here's a snapshot again. I'm not going to walk you through that in detail, but on our respect model, we're going to focus on the conversational angle today. And I think from here, it's over to you guys, Lee and Kevin.
Okay, Sonja, thank you very much. Well, in case you didn't remember, we finished our session last time with a proposal that we were going to invite somebody who we had regard for, who can take us much more deeply into the area of respect. I think it was fair to say from our last conversation that there's no doubt amongst anybody of the significance of respect or being respected. And whilst we all feel that and we all know it, it's sometimes quite difficult to explain why this is so important for us. And so what we wanted to do was to go a little bit deeper. Why is it that respect is so important? And I flagged up this slide in our last session to say we were going to talk about things which ordinarily we might not get to in our working or occupational lives. Here are some concepts that we might touch on: truth and authenticity, unconditional positive regard, authentic dialogue. What did we mean by these things? And I'm delighted to welcome, and you can see him twice. He's live on video, and here is a picture in case you need a still image. It's not often he moves so fast around the screen, but welcome, Lee. Thank you very much for sparing some time this morning and joining us for this session.
Oh, you're welcome. Pleasure to be here with you guys and with you, Kevin.
Excellent. So just for our participants here, I've given Sonja a little bit of permission, which is she is free to interrupt Lee and I when one of you posts a question or a statement in chat that she thinks is important. But for the most part, my job is simply to ask Lee some really difficult questions and get him to talk to us. Okay, so we're going to dive straight in, Lee. And Lee and I had spent a little bit of time talking to each other before this session, not rehearsing, but just exploring. And Lee said something to me about the nature of respect, which I wrote down, and I want to play back to him because it was really struck me as being very important. He doesn't know this is coming, by the way, which is that what respect requires is for us to be abundantly open to the openness of the other. And I wonder if you could pick up from that point and tell us what you meant by that, being abundantly open to the openness of the other.
Yeah, sure. And it's and even just that really is you know, is an approach to another person. I would kind of view it as a sort of an approach to another rather than an attitude or a position. So it's an approach. So how I would view that in the world of psychotherapy is how it's really underpinned by many of the great religions and the great philosophies that says, and I agree with it, that we have deep down in us an ethical self, where we all are aware of, even though possibly unconsciously, that we have intrinsic value in ourselves that requires respect. So to be open to the other would be to engage in that respectful interaction that will touch us more deeply to our ethical core, shall we say, to elicit that sense of the uniqueness of the other. So to be fully open to another is to see another person in their uniqueness, to value them, to respect them, to have a sense of mutuality. So to encounter that is to be really open to the uniqueness of whom we might encounter, and with a view to respecting and valuing.
So when we were talking about this, Lee, you introduced me to somebody who I hadn't heard of before. It was a philosopher, Martin Buber, and I had a little look. In fact, you recommended a book that I should read, and so I took a look at that. And you introduced me to one of his concepts, which sort of resonated, which was the I-it and the I-thou. And I wonder if you could just expand on the meaning of those two, of that concept.
Yeah, sure. So, he was a philosopher of the, excuse me, earlier 20th century. And he saw that we have two modes of being. So essentially, he saw the I-it, which is how we all fundamentally experience one another. So there's an I and there's an it. So there's an I and there's an object. And it's fundamentally how we experience one another, which is to really be kind of like a passive observer of someone else. And in a way, it's about utilizing someone else and evaluating someone else. That's the kind of primary mode that we operate in. But he suggests that with authentic dialogue becomes the I and the thou. So the I and the thou is where we are open to the otherness of the other through experiencing someone. Well, it's I suppose the I, he says the I and the it is experience. We're experiencing one another, but through objectifying, evaluating, classifying, utilizing. But the I and the thou is the approach. It's more of a dialogical approach. It's an authentic dialogical approach, which is fully open to the uniqueness of the other. So then Martin Buber really influenced humanistic psychotherapy, which came in the 1950s, where I think I saw in your slides where you talked about unconditional positive regard. So Carl Rogers was a real founder of humanistic psychotherapy, along with others, but his core conditions were empathy, congruence, and unconditional positive regard. So unconditional positive regard is about prizing the totality of someone rather than commanding or, you know, utilizing, manipulating, shall we say. It's open to the totality of them, whereas the other person experiences respect from someone. So the I and the thou is to be fully open to another person. Having said that, he also says that the I thou of two people is fleeting. So as soon as we reflect on the I and the thou, it becomes I it again. So it's not, you know, let's just say this isn't something that we kind of, damn, I haven't done I thou today. You know, it's fleeting, but the, you know, the kind of moments of being fully open to someone, but that we do drop back to, you know, an I it experience with another person. But the I it, he says, is where we feel alienated and unfulfilled, which you don't experience in an I thou, because you feel fully seen and understood and appreciated and valued and respected.
So there are so many things you've said there that I could land on, and I'm sure people listening to this are wanting to as well. Sonja's going to do her first little piece of interruption, so go for it, Sonja.
And it's an interruption that I'm making from the position of not being a native speaker, not because it was in the chat, because I'm conscious we have many not native speakers. So for me, can you, and this is just for me, can you dumb this down for me a little bit? I'm not sure I fully followed. And if I couldn't fully follow, maybe other people couldn't fully follow either.
Okay, let me ask Lee a question which might help with this a little bit. So there is something a little arcane about the I it, I thou. Thou is a word in English is not used very much, but I think what Lee is saying is that, I'll check this in with you, Lee, that on the one hand, the I it relationship is where we might regard people as resources, things to be used, things to be administered, things to be moved around, things that will support our achievement of goals and ends. And so in some sense, there's a sort of dispensability to how we might consider people. And I'm sort of struck by this because, you know, in the world of work, we do things like that. You know, there's an imperative to get things done. And so we might very much in some level consider people as resources that have to be utilized, not used in the sense of being inappropriately treated, but utilized. The I thou seems to be about some sort of closer relationship, closer experience, closer encounter, I think was a word that you used. So is it, you also saying that we do the I it a lot of the time, and that the I thou is an aspirational thing. It's fleeting. We can't get to it very often. Is it a desirable goal? And is it possible to have respectful relationships when you're in the I it rather than the I thou space?
I suppose another way, just to maybe, as you rightly say, to kind of dumb it down, because this is language that is chewy. So the thou, we could replace thou with you. So there's an I and an it. So there's an I and an object, which I'm classifying and evaluating, as you say, sort of administering things to. But an I and a you is realizing that there's someone in their uniqueness that is, you know, that kind of like a flow of respectful interaction, which you know, can happen in the I it. Let's you know, maybe reframe it that I it can facilitate respectful interaction. That's not to say, you know, I guess I'm just kind of classifying how where the kind of deeper sense of our ethical core is. So we know when we feel disrespected, we know what that's like, and we feel misaligned with others, and we might feel shame, or we might feel a whole number of things. But if we're really open to another person, that's less likely to happen. But, you know, I suppose in an if we are to kind of use this as the framework to respect someone, is to, you know, is to appreciate them, to value them, you know, to value them, and to be less of that, you know, kind of utilizing and objectifying. It's, you know, kind of really respectful interaction, really.
So, but I think you said something that was very interesting there, because for me to respect them, I have to be open. So are you suggesting that it sort of starts with me? It's not about what I do to somebody, because we often talk in terms of giving people respect. So it's not so much what I'm doing to somebody else, it's about the state of mind I have to be in order for somebody to feel respected. Is it that way round?
Well, the state of mind where one person is will affect the other, because it will impact on the interaction. But that wouldn't be to, you know, that it also comes, you know, if we kind of take it back then to I, as you say, it also is determined how we view ourselves with respect, and how we might view another person with respect. So do we value ourselves? Do we appreciate ourselves? Or are we hard on ourselves? Do we kind of punish ourselves? And that, you know, so we all bring our own histories and our, it's a therapeutic term, but our organizing principles, our beliefs and our assumptions and our sense of who we are to an encounter, an interaction with someone else. So that will impact on the possibility of respectful interaction.
So it's difficult. I mean, we did an event a few weeks ago looking at emotional intelligence, and there's a sort of connection between that theme and this theme. And the people we were working with on that occasion made the point, which I think is an interesting point, and it seems like you might be reinforcing it, which is we can't really offer other people respect unless we respect ourselves, and unless we're not coming to the conversation or the interaction with somebody else with a view of ourselves which is, let me put it in these terms, more positive than negative. I'm wondering the extent to which you would subscribe to that view.
Of
the importance of, so if I'm to hold a respectful conversation with you, if I'm to respect you and for you to feel respected, it's a harder thing for that to happen if I come to it without a positive view of myself, without a respectful view of myself. If I'm colored by anxiety or doubt or indecision or more strongly negative emotions, that is going to affect the way in which I'm choosing to interact with you. And it becomes very difficult to hold a respectful dialogue at that point. Is that true? Or would it be possible for me to operate with you respectfully, irrespective of how I'm feeling about myself?
So, you know, it comes down to, I suppose, you know, there are aspects of it that gender, ethnicity, culture, a whole number of things that we all have our own beliefs about whether what we respect or not, and we bring that to an encounter. But yeah, I suppose, you know, respect, like, is ingrained in our formative years, like most things. You know, so of our formative years, when we wanted to be appreciated by mum and dad or whoever, did that happen? Did we experience feeling appreciated and valued? Did we, when we wanted a response for something we'd done, were we responded to in a respectful, oh, that's wonderful what you've just done, or, you know, 3 years old holding up a little painting they've done of a stick figure or something? Was that accepted? You know, so that's where we get a sense of how we're accepted and valued and prized. So we bring all of that to an encounter. So if we have a sense of, you know, deeper down, it might not really be on display, because we often operate at a kind of personality level rather than that kind of deeper ethical level. Not to kind of blur it in any way, but we do fundamentally operate at more of a kind of personality level. And that personality level will be influenced of our formative years, where we've received respect or not. So if we experienced harshness or dismissal, or, you know, not feeling appreciated when we wanted to show who we were, that will impact on how we view ourselves respectfully or not, and then that will impact on how we see someone else. Does that make sense?
Got two questions here from the group, which I think would fit quite nicely. So the first one is from Tony, and if I read this correctly, she's asking, is respect in what we do as opposed to respecting the other person as from a sort of default position? So is respect more an action than a state of mind, I guess, is where he's getting at. And then, if I may, the second question as well. There's so this is why who's asking about whether respect is linked to the intent of the relationship, and whether respect is linked to the term of the relationship. So in the immediate term, in the long term, or both. Quite
wow. Good question. So the first of these, Sonja, let's just play the first one back to Lee again, because they're quite complex questions. The first one has to do with whether respect is a state of mind. Is that correct?
Is it respect? So the question reads, is it respect what a person does versus respecting the person?
Okay. Lee.
Sorry, say it again. I thought there was something about it's what we do. Sorry, could you repeat it? You need to unmute, sorry.
Oh, sorry, yeah, that would help, wouldn't it? Sorry.
Do you want me to read my question?
Tony, go for it.
Is it respect? Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so what I wrote was, is it to respect what the person does, or is it about respecting the person?
Ah, good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. That is a good question, but it's how we experience ourselves and how we experience another. So what someone does is in the mix, it's in there, but it's essentially really about who the person is that we experience uniquely and respectfully about who they are. But let's say it's so contextual, because I suppose in any kind of, you know, like a business world, if there's a deadline of something and someone gets it in on time, oh, you know, you respect that person because there's a value placed on deadlines. So, you know, meeting a deadline, as an example, is a doing. It's an active doing. So there would be there's a value placed on a completion of that. So there is that, but if fundamentally it's about who the person truly is. But sure, doing what someone does will come into it.
So if I may, I think this is a really important crux here, because, you know, organizationally, operationally, we do, as you say, Lee, place value on those sorts of output dimensions. Did somebody complete the work on time? Was it to the quality? Was it to the standard? Is it creative enough, etc., etc.? And dissociating the act from the person is actually very difficult to do. Now, the reverse of that, of course, is when somebody fails to do those things. And so we might feel compelled, and most managers would, in one way or another, point out to the individual that they've not delivered what was expected of them. And I think this is where it gets very difficult for people, or it becomes more difficult. You know, how do I communicate that message in a way that somebody hears it, can accept it, but isn't undermined, and doesn't feel disrespected as a consequence of the conversation. That's where these two things, I think, become quite tricky to really land very well. On the one hand, I'm being asked to respect the deep uniqueness of the individual, and ethically, I feel like I want to do that. On the other hand, this is the third time in a month that he's failed to deliver, and it's making me really angry. I'm only human, so what do I do about that? How do I hold on to the respect but still deliver a difficult conversation? And I'm afraid we're putting you on the spot on these things today as a psychotherapist. You know, how do you handle that type of thing?
Shall I give you a practical example?
Go on, Tony.
Just out of interest. So Kevin knows me. I like to do things on time, to a high standard, those types of things. But sometimes I have felt disrespected by one or two individuals in that maybe their personal beliefs are that maybe as a woman, I'm still not good enough. Or there is something else that is underlying that they still do not respect me as a person. They may be pleased that I've delivered something on time to a high standard, but there is something that they do not respect about me. And I've worked in military, hierarchical, male-dominated environments, things like that, which have therefore maybe resulted in me questioning, what is it that I am not doing, or what is it about me that is still not gaining me the respect I think I deserve, based on the standards that have been formed in me since I was small. So just by way of an example.
Yeah, that's a great example, because it does take us into the bigger kind of context of performance, of gender, of all those things you mentioned. And sadly, we don't achieve this. That's the fundamentals of we often don't meet that respect of others. You know, it's like I said before, it's really difficult. There are so many layers to it. And then we miss what the kind of philosophical underpinnings talk about, that kind of ethics of reciprocity, to experience someone mutually. But if a woman, you know, as you say, like feeling, I feel disrespected as a woman, I'm not good enough, you know, right there, that's deep, isn't it? That's a deep feeling of like, I don't feel good enough. So how can that be facilitated? How can that be helped? How can that be healed for you to feel a greater sense of respect? It's really complicated, and you know, and I'm talking from a kind of psychotherapeutic stance. So it's very different from, you know, the kind of the business world. But to be able to stay open to someone, to be able to yeah, I'm just thinking of that. I'm just really sitting with that example of yours. It's
so just
really
as you're,
May I ask a follow-up?
It doesn't bother me,
this?
by the way. I accepted that there is something that they do not, there is something there. So I accept that completely and move on. But it is an interesting concept.
May I ask a follow-up question on this?
Sonja, just to interrupt you, if I may, could we give some attention to the second question that was asked?
Yes. The second question was in relation to does respect depend on the intent of the relationship, the immediate term, long term, or both? That's the question. Would it depend on the intent of the relationship, the immediate term, long term, or both?
I don't know if the person who framed the question would like to reveal themselves and perhaps elaborate on the question a little bit?
Could I just say, like, just a bit to that, because, hearing that and thinking, the short term, the long term, the kind of outcome, perhaps it feels like, perhaps it's framed around maybe something I'm not so familiar with, but just hearing that the intent, whilst an intent is there, again, sadly, sometimes we still don't achieve that, because the intent can be there, but we can unintentionally disrespect someone because of all the assumptions we have of the world, who we are, who the other person is. Intent can bring respect, but it could also, like I say, we can disrespect unintentionally.
Hi, this is Wai Sing from Singapore. Actually, I shouldn't be talking too long. I'm actually at my son's class.
Again.
So yeah, no, it's again the other son's class. But thank you so much for answering that, Lee. I think you are very right. It's the behavior intent gap as well. So totally understand that bit. Sometimes we have certain positive or noble intents, but then our behaviors come out totally the other way. I mean, the classic one is where even your closest colleague can be like saying things like, it's not personal, but your work is absolute crap, something like that. And you're like, yeah, okay, thanks for that. And I don't know how to feel that way. And the discussion has made me feel that it also depends on how you receive the other person. I mean, like you said, it's not just being open about giving, but it's also about being open when receiving. It's like feedback, receiving and giving, and trying to get through all those assumptions. Thank you.
That's a lovely explanation, Wai Sing. Thank you very much. So, Sonja, you did have a supplementary question to the first question.
I did, and it's specifically about this notion that respect is something that others have to give me, because I could relate to the example. I'm a woman who works in mainly male-dominated environments and have my entire life, and I've always approached it from a position of everybody. I take the respect I want. I position myself in a way that will not allow people to disrespect me, therefore had a very different experience. I simply ignore, or I might not pick up on not being respected at all. So is there something in how you approach the idea of the respect you deserve that's connected to how we perceive being respected?
Well, you touched on something great there, because as you say, I'm taking respect because deep down at the core of yourself, you value yourself and you deserve respect. That it takes us back down to that, well, I'm going to take it. I don't have it, but I'm going to take it because I deserve respect. As I say, we all do deep down. To take respect is an interesting one, because of how all the kind of how it's all how it's all tainted. As you say, you're a woman in a predominantly male environment, that women have less power, have less voice, less value. So you've had to take it.
Yeah, I think my question is there something about our own notion of respect and how we think about it? If we don't see the difference between I should be respected and I might not feel respected, does that does that influence others in some way? But the chat is going wild, so I'm gonna move away from my own questions and try to answer them for myself. So we've got a really great comment here from Neil that I want to share. Respect makes me think about non-violent communication. Marshall Rosenberg, express what I see, how I feel, what I need. And I think the other element it says is share your feelings willingly as if they are Christmas presents. I think that's a wonderful notion. And then we have a comment from Dolly here as well, saying that I think it is further complex in that in one culture, offering a lady a chair to sit on is considered respect. And so the person does it out of respect, but the other person may perceive it as discriminatory and disrespect. So each person's definition of respect may also bring other elements to be considered. I think that's a great point around the whole gender conversation.
Okay, so I'm delighted people offering some advice here, and I'd just like to confirm the reference to MVC and Marshall Rosenberg. There's some great stuff to read in there. I think one of the things that I'd just like to come back to is that the sense I'm getting from this conversation, and maybe Lee, you'd like to comment on this, is that this thing about respect is not a straightforward thing. And that in the same way, when we talked about emotional intelligence a few weeks ago, the view expressed was that we have to continuously work at tuning in emotionally to what's going on. We don't always get it right, we get it wrong. And it seems to me that we sometimes get it wrong. And it seems to me that when we're talking about respect, this is actually, and this is why we wanted to speak to somebody like you today, Lee, this is far from being a simple idea. It goes a long way beyond assessing an organization's ability to respect people on the basis of the number of performance reviews it does a year, which I know some organization use as a test to see how respectful it is. I mean, here we seem to be concerned with a deep understanding of ourselves, the extent to which we take care of ourselves, have respect for ourselves, an open-mindedness that allows us to release that to others, and a desire to, where it becomes possible in the cut and thrust of work, to really tune in and try to see and understand people for who they are and how they are. And this is not a 5-minute job, I think is my statement. And so I'm looking for some corroboration or not from you, Lee, about, you know, if I as an individual think respect is fundamentally important, what can I do practically? What can I do day to day that tunes me into the fact that I may or may not be respecting myself or others?
You know, to examine ourselves, fundamentally to examine our biases, to examine our own, you know, unconscious beliefs. You know, we fundamentally operate at the kind of personality level, and there are different personality types, and each of those has values that the other one doesn't. You know, that in the workplace there will be, you know, there will be personality types that are guardians of other people. They promote other people. They're there for the kind of needs of other people, and they dismiss themselves. You know, they kind of don't want to promote themselves. It's about other people. And then there are some other types that are a bit more kind of heroic, that want to meet every challenge and every deadline and so on. So they have their own set of values based on the formative experience, you know, a formative life coming up of what, through, you know, a family of origin, through the culture and the environment around us, that tells us what is valuable in us, which means then, you know, other aspects of other personality types we don't recognize as a good value, you know, like a hero type who might look at someone who always promotes other people. They might disrespect that person because, like, you should be gunning for yourself, or you know, as an example. So it's to really kind of examine ourselves, to then be able to be open to another person, seeing them uniquely, to see how they function in the world through what their personality style is. So, and that goes for, you know, managers and who they manage, and vice versa in a way, but to be able to kind of check in with ourselves and realize, oh, what is it I value, and why might it be that I don't value this in the other person? And that could be much more starkly as we're talking about race and gender and so forth, but just kind of characteristics of one another.
So for me, or for anybody else, I might conceive of some sort of daily practice, which is, you know, maybe reflecting after an encounter with somebody on how that went, what was my attitude as I went into that conversation, what reactions did I seem to be getting, why was I getting those reactions? So actually, the secret to unfolding this is, I guess, internally, continuous reflection. I think is what you termed a minute ago, the examined life. Does that take us closer to what we might realistically do in this area?
Yeah, that's the steps that can lead to it, because to reflect is to look inside at ourselves and think, oh, what was that about? And what for the other person? Was I too much? Was I too little? Was I, you know, reflection.
I'm getting very conscious of time, because we've always billed these sessions as being fairly short. I've one final question for you, Lee, just see if you can give us a very quick response to this, and then I'll go back to Sonja. We've made a point in our model about distinguishing being polite from being respectful. What, in your view, is the difference between being polite and being respectful?
The difference between polite and being respectful, well, as excuse me, as we've discussed, you know, respect is fundamentally about who we are, that intrinsic value we have in ourselves. But politeness is something that we all undergo in a civilization process when we're young. It's that civilization, we become civilized to what is conventionally acceptable. What's acceptable here? But so politeness is great in and of itself, let's say that, but actually it can really dam up and push down on what I would say is a kind of passionate, independent life. What it can, what it, you know, in a way, politeness is too low a bar for discourse, because it dams down really self-assertion. So politeness, great, but is, you know, again, it's that kind of reflecting on, well, what didn't I assert there that was more authentic? And that doesn't mean, you know, when we talk about that, we can what can often happen is we go, oh, politeness, then if we're not that, we're impolite. Yeah. But that's just a swing to the other way. Yeah. You know, there's a whole grey area in between that's about self-assertion.
Okay, I'm going to stop you at that point, Lee. I love this expression, politeness is too low a bar for discourse. I think that sums it up very nicely. Sonja, are there any final comments or questions in the chat box, which
there are a few. From Armin, in simple words, isn't it down to our own values in the first place to determine how aware we may or may not offer respect to others in practically all situations we encounter? And then we have a little anecdote from Neil from talking about respect at Toyota, involving a great deal of personal challenge. And that a worker from Toyota could come home and say, I received a little bit of too much respect today. which I love. It's fantastic. And then again from Tony, a common question is whether polite versus respect is linked to the levels of superficiality that we're approaching others with or situation with.
Fantastic. It would be terribly disrespectful if we didn't try to conclude this session pretty much on time. So we're going to do what we did last time. Sonja, I'm just going to ask you just to highlight what's happening next and when.
Yes.
Then we'll just wrap up.
So next time we're taking the organizational angle together with Helen Rhodes, who's the Senior HR Director. You name it, she's worked there. Although it's also a complex subject, I don't think it's going to be quite as complex as a personal angle today. So we're going to look at the policy angle. What policies can organizations use to bring respect, to institutionalize respect into their organization? So D&I, diversity and inclusion, health and safety, the way we performance manage, the way we approach sustainability, all those type of elements. What is there in terms of policies for an organization to create a respectful environment, and how do you make it happen in the workplace?
Okay, that's fantastic. So we're going to do what we've done before. Formally, I'm going to thank Lee in just a second. Formally, we're going to close the discussion now, but certainly I think, Sonja, and I hope Lee can just remain on the line for maybe another 10 or 15 minutes for those people who have more questions or want to continue with the discussion. If you'd like to leave, you're free to leave. I would just like to say before you leave, would like to thank Lee very much for his time today. We've deliberately tried to do something a little different. We've deliberately tried to go deeper and explore things which ordinarily wouldn't come into the domain of work. And for that reason, the language has been a little unfamiliar to people. We hope that you've kept pace with it. I think there's been some really interesting insights. I think my takeaway from this is a difficult subject area. This is a difficult thing. It's sort of no wonder organizations fret and worry about it, because it's just not straightforward. And it requires a lot of personal effort, personal reflection, personal discipline, maybe even getting into areas of ourselves that are uncomfortable to try to understand it. But maybe that's good enough. Maybe if we're just prepared to invest the time in painfully searching, then it will lead to our ability to respect ourselves and respect others better. So Lee, thank you very much.
I'd like to second that. I think what I'm taking away from this, because I'm a very practical person, is I go away from every meeting examining how I used my voices, my nine Soundwave voices. What I would add to that is examining what biases of mine have been in play, and what assumptions I made more deeply, because I believe that's the practical element I take away from this. The more I examine my assumption and biases, the better I will be able to show respect to everyone.
Okay, so thank you.
Thank you.
You are free to leave. You are free to stay. Formally, that's the end of our session, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks' time, we very much hope. Lee, thank you so much again for giving us your time. We've really enjoyed it.
Oh, you're welcome. I've enjoyed it too.
Good, good.
I'll stick around for a bit.
Okay.
Thank you, guys. See you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.